Okay, let's start now. Okay, welcome to the Indonesia Project Global Web Seminars on COVID-19. This series is supported by the Australian National University and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Your hosts are myself, Arianto Patundru, Nurkamala, and Baskara Adiwena. Today, we will have a discussion on trade, industry, and investment, how they deal with COVID-19 in Indonesia. And our speakers are Krisna Gupta from ANU, Andree Surianta, also from ANU, but also with the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies. And today's seminar will be chaired by Dr. Deasy Pane from Bappenas, who will also give some comments to the seminars presented by Krisna and Andree. So let me turn this over to Deasy to kick off the seminar. Please, Deasy.
Thank you so much, Pak Acho. Good morning, everyone in Indonesia, and good afternoon, everyone in Australia. My name is Deasy. It's really great to come back to the ANU, even though it is virtually. Thanks to Indonesia Project for inviting me to chair today's webinar. I'm very grateful to be part of this webinar, as we all know that Indonesia Project has established weekly webinars that are very important, prestigious, and also very useful for further discussion. Today's webinar is also very important. The topic is on trade, industry, and investment dealing with COVID-19. And we are very fortunate to have two great speakers. We have Krisna Gupta and Andree Surianta, two rising stars, PhD student from ANU. Krisna will talk about recent development in trade in industry, and while Andree will focus on FDI. Both of them are very active in writing and do research on those topics and have produced some articles related to that topic. Krisna is doing his PhD in economics in Crawford School, ANU. His PhD topic is on the impact of trade and investment policy reform to industry in Indonesia. Before taking his PhD, Krisna worked for the Ministry of Industry in Indonesia, as well as teaching in Polytechnic APP in Jakarta. So Krisna is knowledgeable and has experience on the topic and also understand challenge that might be appeared in government side. Our other speaker, Andree Surianta, is doing PhD in POGO, Policy and Governance in Crawford School. His PhD topic is on FDI, the role of foreign language skill and its policy implication in developing countries. Andree is also a researcher. He is associate researcher in the Center for Indonesia Policy Studies, CIPS, a think tank organization based in Indonesia. Okay, without further ado, let's start our presentation. So we'll start with presentation from Krisna for 20 minutes, and then Andree also for 20 minutes. Then I will give short comments for both presentation, and then we have a Q&A. Over to you, Krisna. You have around 20 minutes. The time is yours.
Thank you, Deasy Pane. That's a lot of burden on my shoulder. Thanks a lot for your gracious introduction. Now let me share my screen. Can you see it just fine?
Yeah.
All right. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today. I will share a bit of my knowledge on trade and industry policy during COVID-19 in Indonesia. My name is Krisna Gupta, as you guys already know. So some intro. I will focus mostly on trade policy, and if my lips move fast enough, I will also try to cover a little bit of manufacturing. Mind you that the policies that I'm going to talk about is basically Indonesian government trying to secure the availability and price of COVID-19 related goods, such as swabs, PCR tests, PPEs, and the likes. We will discuss whether this is good or not so much, and if there's a better way to do this. Admittedly, my information is kind of limited from up here, so if any of the participants have better information, feel free to show up in the Q&A. We'll discuss it. So, trade policies. What happens in Indonesia during COVID-19 thingy happens. First of all, let me share you a little bit that in Indonesia tariff is controlled fully by Ministry of Finance. But there is things called non-tariff measures, you know, such as standards, permits, quota restriction. This kind of thing is controlled by 13 different agencies. The most active one is Ministry of Trade, but Ministry of Industry's role is on the rise with Indonesian's national standard, SNE, local content requirement, TKDN, and those things that under Ministry of Industry control. And of course, during the health crisis, Ministry of Health has some role in controlling trade of medical goods. So first, Ministry of Trade enforced an export ban in March 17th, affects 40 different lines of tariffs, including antiseptics, its material, PPEs, its material, and also they do import relaxation on 19 different tariff lines related to COVID. So normally these goods, if you want to import them, you will need some permits and stuff. So they relax them. And there's also this presidential regulation, Bappenas 58, which in emergency give permit to SOE, state-owned enterprise, to import anything they need. So this permit will come from Gugus Tugas, the Indonesian Special Task Force, and then the SOE is ready to go to make things much more speedy. Ministry of Health relaxed an import permit on medical equipment. So this medical equipment is not covered by Ministry of Trade regulation. So normally if you want to import medical equipment, you need permits from Ministry of Health and Indonesian Nuclear Agency. They scrap it, so you don't need them anymore. Ministry of Health also improve the speed of issuing manufacturing license. So normally if you want to make medical grade things such as PPEs, a ventilator and stuff, you need a license from the Ministry of Health. So they try to make that speedier, resulting in huge increase in mask producers, surgical gown producers, hand sanitizer producers. So yeah, it's good to, you know, ramp up production. Lastly, Ministry of Finance remove tariffs, as they usually do. Oops, sorry. The tariff covers 73 different lines, so lots of tariff lines, including testing kits, medical equipment. Before COVID, tariffs was quite big. So thankfully, with this, things get more cheaper. We can import more things, more accessible. And this is the timeline of those all trade policies, right? So the red line is the total case, still rising exponentially. The scale is on the right, and the left is the new tests. It's represented by the blue bars. So one thing to note that the first export ban happened in 17th of March. It's just one day after a news saying that Indonesian mask export unprecedentedly rising up very fast, very huge. Of course, amid COVID, Chinese imports a lot from us during February. Singapore, Hong Kong as well. They got hit first before us. And then just a day after that news, first export ban happened. So it's kind of quick, if you ask me, like doing this trade ban, probably even quicker than other policies, such as, you know, the lockdowns and other health policies. And then a month later, then the Ministry of Finance starts removing tariffs. So this is the table that I collected. So it's basically showing import-export in 2018-2019 and the policies that affecting it in a 6-digit H code. I won't kind of discuss a lot about it, but you can see that Indonesia basically export a lot of ethyl alcohol and soap and import a lot of PCR testing, and then, you know, test instruments. Of course, PPE, Indonesia mostly export them, but exception is textile face masks, where most of them is imported. Half of them came from China, like 50%. So yeah, of course, the slide will be available. So if you think you need those numbers that I collected, you can always download the slide on or send me an email. So let's discuss it a little bit on how those play out. First of all, we need to know that Indonesia and other part of the world trade this a lot. So I'm collecting Indonesian export and import on COVID-19 related goods. I'm using classification from WCO and WHO. So basically, as you can see on the table down there, Indonesia mostly import a lot of things relative to its export, except for PPE. So yeah, Indonesia export more than it's importing, but the point is we trade this thing, we're in this together, other countries need us as much as we need other countries. Imagine if we ban export and then suddenly the other countries decided to, okay, we cannot buy from Indonesia anymore, why should we give them our goods? You can see that an eye of a knife turn the whole world blind, destroy trust between countries, and of course trade ban also limit price increase. Of course, we don't want to buy expensive stuff, but on the other hand, if price increase is limited, then firms will think twice before they, invest in increasing production. And of course, Indonesia also received lots of help from other countries these days that got that COVID first, like China, South Korea, Japan. Secondly, I think this is the more compelling argument, is the global value chain. Okay, yeah, it's been under attack for some time this day, but global value chain means, when you say about final good, is not really a final good. So it's a result of lots of processes happened in different parts of the world. Typically, less developed countries contribute by producing the lower value part of the good, right? And value chain makes so the supply chain a bit complicated, lots of nodes in different countries. So if you try to regulate between country trade, it becomes hard, because it's probably a part of a process of a final good, right? And intra-firm trade is now more common. So same firm established in different part of the world, just trading between itself, but between countries. So that makes regulating between countries becomes a bit less intuitive. Next is export Indonesia of PPE. This is a very compelling story that happened in Indonesia back in this couple of months. So although we say Indonesia exports a lot of PPE, are we really exporting PPE? Because we import, by we I mean Indonesia. Sorry, I'm Indonesian. Sorry. Indonesia import a lot of inputs for making a good quality PPE. This is what I collected from my limited knowledge on the supply chain of PPE, admittedly. But yeah, Indonesia import a lot of things. So it's not like Indonesia really export PPE. It's probably more like Indonesia export tailoring skill. You know what I'm saying? So if you have a good textile, you come to your tailor and say, hey, tailor, how are you? I want to make a good dress from this textile, please make it. And then tailor make it. And then the next day you can say, where's my dress? Here it is. So it's kind of like that. Imagine if the tailor says, oh no, I actually like your dress. Can I keep it for myself? You probably get angry, right? So bottom line, supply chain is disrupted. It's make hard for firm to make a reliable decision. Where should I import my input from? Where should I sell my goods to if my government ban my trade, right? So, and it's not very easy to find new partners from different countries, and you probably will think, okay, maybe these countries will ban their trade later on. So everything becomes unpredictable, hard to make a good decision. Comparative advantage is less optimized because of this. Australia never really do a lot of textile production, but because other countries that usually do it for them ban their trade, they have to do it, even if it incurs more cost. Printing PPE is more expensive than tailoring it, On the other hand, Indonesia, countries like Indonesia can no longer import their input because other countries cannot export them because they will afraid, okay, I will not get my garment back, right? So has to make do, Indonesian PPE makers, with cotton-based fabrics, which is not very good compared to the plastic non-woven fabrics, but, better than nothing. So this map I get from the World Development Report 2020, which kind of show which countries put themselves in which part of the global value chain. Indonesia is, according to this World Bank report, on the limited manufacturing part of the value chain. Unfortunately, COVID-19 related goods are somewhat advanced to make. Ventilators is hard, making vaccine is not really easy. Drugs, also something that's not very easy and quick to make. So without asking help from other countries and without we helping the other countries, it's probably hard to to make a good amount of those stuff, especially in the new normal time where we probably will need a huge number of masks, where wearing masks becomes a norm, right? We need more stuff, but if we need more stuff, then we probably will need more trade, not less, all right? So import relaxation, also done by Indonesian government, this thing is probably good. SOE have a special privilege. Of course, they need the speed to produce things, but I don't know, import privilege, sometimes not always great. Remember beef and garlic import privilege? But yeah, this is emergency anyway. In general, it's a good measure, I think, to allow import. As long as the world can provide them, then it's fine. And as long as Indonesia can buy it, then it's fine. Standard, lastly, let me make a good small comment on standard. Standard is a delicacy. Turning it off, it did increase in the numbers of PPE being made, but China did that before. Manufacturers repurpose their normal factory into PPE factory. They managed to, increase the scale and then send it to the other parts of the world. Unfortunately, some of them is faulty, not very good. Spain, Turkey, Netherlands, and Australia learned it a bit of a hard way. So they tested and it's not very good, send them back. So Indonesia also have a lot from China. I haven't really know if there's a report that we got a fault, Indonesia got a faulty mask from China. Hopefully not, but if it is, then it could be dangerous, especially for those who, fighting on the front line, the medical workers, so to speak. Chinese government finally introduced a port inspection, but that leads to a longer wait time. So indeed, it's decreasing the speed and amount of production, but it's better than if you send faulty products. Indonesia did the same thing. The PPE firms rose, production also increased. Here's come the however, the government don't buy them because the quality isn't acceptable to them. So Indonesian buy this centralized under Ministry of Health command. So they refuse to buy it because it's low quality. It's not exactly what the hospital needs. So yeah, probably they can export it, but but they cannot write because of the export ban. Thankfully, Ministry of Trade removed the export ban on 17th of June. But question remains, can they really export it? I mean, finding domestic production is very hard for me. I haven't managed to, successfully do that. This is I got from Jakarta Post. There's 4 different products, but don't really talk about quality, right? So if those are mostly cotton-based, then probably not very good. And if Indonesian can export PPE, they probably don't need import tariff to protect them, right? So some of the changes, apart from the removing of export ban, Ministry of Finance reintroduced some tariffs on July 7th. This is new on antiseptics, some PPEs, PCR equipments. Maybe a sign that we can make them ourselves. I don't know. We'll see. This is new thing. Data isn't really timely at this moment, at least for me, but we'll see. However, Purpose 56 still give SOEs, the privilege to import things. Like Biopharma needs to import inputs to increase PCR capacity. So fingers crossed. Hopefully that's left open. This is the updated. As you can see, took a while until export being relaxed and some rules expired and tariff returns. Hopefully fine. That graphic looks really scary to me. Anyway, bottom line, trade policy isn't working. That's what I'm trying to argue here. Indeed, PPE market was failing. Probably other market is failing. Testing capacity is still hard to make. It's still expensive. Blah blah blah. Those failing condition, government indeed needs to intervene, but be careful, right? So you can't just intervene. It's hard to, you have to think a bit more using trade policy. It's actually family tool for Indonesian government. Been using this for a long time. Like when Lebaran came, beef price increased. Okay, let's open import, and then price starting to go down. Oh, okay, let's ban them again. So it's been used for quite some time, but when everyone is affected, when everyone have Lebaran and everyone wants to buy beef, then opening it probably won't be helpful. COVID affect everyone, right? So, and then value chain needs a sophisticated policies, supply chain is now complex. We need more data to make an accurate decision. Maybe if we don't have data, maybe we should do less policy. We'll see. I mean, things get complicated these days. Be careful with standards. Turning it off doesn't mean always good. Turning it on also problematic. But thing is, GVC is the problem, right? If we want to wait until we self-sufficient, how many of people's lives lost? Problem isn't trade. We never really see this coming. We don't have strategic reserves on PPE. Many countries also don't have this, to be fair. Lots of countries have like rice, strategic reserves, oil, strategic reserves, dollars, but PPE is never really in the mind of any government, really. Repurposing industries hasn't been optimal, but it's something that we can do. Information is the key. Again, data. Supply chain is a bit, make things complex. You need to know this. Niche using targeted policy. You need to target what industry that you want to pursue in helping fighting COVID, and then help them using, depends on what they need really, right? And government being inefficient in disbursing money is also another problem. Everything is centralized during COVID. Everything. So when that centrality, is inefficient, then everything becomes inefficient. Unfortunately. So some lessons, what I said. When markets fail, the government needs to intervene. Turning on and off trade policy is a familiar tool, but things change. We need to be more sophisticated as well. I believe I still have time. Let me discuss a little bit on domestic policies. Manufacturing is going down, down, down. Indonesia is included. Although Indonesian, this is a Purchasing Managers Index, a survey on manufacturers in Indonesia. Indonesia has already have less than 50 PMI since July 2019, but really it's just got hit by COVID so bad. Goes down below 30 on April. The blame goes to demand, right? So the whole world demand is weak. Indonesia in itself has a weak demand. Indonesian rupiah, making calculating of input difficult. This is export and import from Indonesian Statistic Bureau, Bappenas. Basically, it says that migas, import of oil and gas, is going down, 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 meaning, production is probably going down, down, down as well. 85% of Indonesian import are, inputs and capital goods, down, 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 down it goes, down everything, less production. There are lots of domestic policies. I probably have no time discussing them, but you can check out Pak Suwa's last week, or the last week of last week's presentation on PEN stimulus, Percepatan Ekonomi Nasional, or tax cuts, energy subsidy. His Excellency Agus Gumiwang also presenting it pretty nicely on one of the webinar that the links is on this slide. But this is one thing that the Indonesian government did, was making this permit to keep operating. IOMKI, Izin Operasional dan Mobilitas Kegiatan Industri, basically says that during PSBB, or Indonesian way of doing lockdown, manufacturing firms can still operate as long as they have this permit, right? So as you can see from the graph, suddenly everyone wants to have account in online portal because of this IOMKI. It definitely helps. Otherwise they won't sign in, right? It definitely helps. However, here comes the however, I'm sorry about that. Labor intensive is basically Indonesian manufacturing, mostly in a plant that is labor intensive. Social distancing, physical distancing is probably a problem because you have lots of labor in a small amount of space. If you cannot have a lot of them in that space, production probably will decrease, just like plant, right? If aircraft have to decrease the numbers of people inside, then the ticket cost will be high. This applies as well. Everything becomes expensive. Laying them off becomes expensive. If you require firms to test them, it becomes very expensive. Just a small amount of output goes down means you have to lay off a lot of people. And these people probably are not in the database of Indonesian social security. Indonesian social security has been good in detecting who's poor or not. These people probably not very poor if they work, right? But if they stop working, then they become poor. Probably data of the social security then has a problem. So in this case, maybe health policy is like the best manufacturing policy you can have, really. As long as COVID is contained, then manufacturing can open again, and hopefully everything will be good. Let me close this by, saying a little bit on IACEPA. Indonesia just signed this. It's a comprehensive trade agreement between the two countries. Two countries already starting to collaborate on standards, on SME empowerment. COVID-19 make things hard. Everyone really have to, concentrate on COVID-19, but it has opportunities, right? The whole country doesn't have leaders right now, unlike the GFC in 2008, where we have a leadership coming here internationally. Now the leaders are fighting each other. Politics isn't great. So under the situation, maybe regionalism can be the start that we need, right? Australia is actively, collaborating with Singapore, New Zealand, other ASEAN countries, travel bubble in discussion. This can be a good way to start, collaborating with our neighbors, especially Indonesian neighbors are seeing, lower case, seeing higher PMI and everything. So yeah, really, probably best bet is collaborating with other countries near Indonesia. We have to do, Indonesian probably can, find the role where they can fit in, and then if vaccine indeed invented can be manufacturing together, or probably by ourselves, is probably we'll never get the scale that we need. So yeah, no leader. We need others' demand. We need their help, and we need to help them as well. So yeah, that's my main. My message is probably globalization. It's everyone hates it, but these days. But yeah, that's probably our best bet to get out of this situation. So here's the sources. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for a very interesting, informative, and very detailed presentation, Krisna. I know everyone has already had some question in mind. If so, please put your question in the Q&A box. We will discuss your question later after presentation from Andree. Maybe we will try to listen to Andree's presentation. You have 20 minutes, Andree. The time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Dr. Deasy. And let me just share my screen first. That's okay, everybody can see that, full screen. I'm excited to be here, and thank you, Indonesia Project, for giving me the opportunity, seeing familiar faces that I haven't seen in months. And just in case anyone is wondering, hello from Jakarta. I'm actually in Jakarta. I cannot return to Australia because of the border closure. So I miss you guys in Canberra. So you have heard from Krisna about the COVID-19 impact on trade in Indonesia. And I'll be speaking, focusing on the foreign direct investment. And I think everybody probably have heard this saying before, that rising tide lifts all boats. And so when the economy is going well, the water is high, everybody just sailing away to their destination. But I think that COVID-19 drains the ocean faster. And why do I say faster? Because the problem of slowdown in the global economy has started even before COVID-19. Right? COVID-19 is not the only thing that slowed down the global economy. US-China trade war happens before that. There's a lot of friction in the global economy. When COVID-19 happens, it just brings the shock. It's like dropping an anchor when you're trying to go full speed. And the water level, the economy has been predicted to shrink a lot. And these are some of the numbers. International trade has been predicted to shrink by 13 to 32%. And FDI inflows, FDI flows globally also down by 30 to 40%, or even 35 to 45%. Right? So quite deep. decrease. Governments around the world have started to take notice about how central China's position is in the world supply chain. And they're getting worried about that. They're trying to encourage their companies to start reshoring, or at the very least, nearshoring. So this opens up opportunity, of course, this restructuring, right? A lot of the companies are looking at Southeast Asia. You see here the tech giants like Apple, Google, and Microsoft. They're encouraging their supply chains, their suppliers, to consider locations probably in Vietnam or Thailand. Japanese government even put up money behind this, and they're allocating some funding to help companies go back to Japan or reshore, or go out to Southeast Asia. Right? There's about 2 billion, of course, mostly is to reshore, and 200 million is to nearshore. Well, if you're in Indonesia, I think you're probably aware of this news flow lately in the past couple of months about US pharmaceutical companies packing up from China and moving to Indonesia. And I become interested in this news, and I did a little bit of tracking and see how the media develops the story. And this is actually from the middle of May up to early July. You see the dates. I hope it's not too small here. So this began when President Jokowi had a call with President Trump talking about medical cooperation, right? And supposedly in that call, Trump mentioned that he wants to tell his pharmaceutical companies to move out of China. And naturally, President Jokowi would offer Indonesia as destination. So the news flow here, as you can see, is developed from that discussion. And then there's a location being identified in Brebes. Now in early June, that shifted a little bit from Brebes to Batang. And finally, we have in July, the numbers. So from 48, then 7 basically is confirmed, 3 are coming to Batang. So when we look at the pharmaceutical, which is the subject of interest in the media discussion here, I think it's useful to look at the API manufacturing. API is the core ingredient for medicines. So these are what's being discussed a lot in terms of the pharmaceutical supply chain. Now, where are all these API factories located? Based on FDA data, this is the American Food and Drug Authority, more than half of the factories are located in US and EU already. So these are big pharmaceutical markets. Even US alone is about 45 times that of Indonesia in terms of the pharmaceutical market. And the other 30%, 31 to be more exact, is located in China and India. Indeed, China has built quite a lot of muscle in the API manufacturing space. We can see that produces thousands of types of raw ingredients and running at 70% capacity. India, on the other hand, also built a substantial capacity there. You see the number of sites actually have more in India, but volume, we're not sure yet. But India's manufacturing, API manufacturing is running below capacity, 30 to 40%. So with a lot of this spare capacity in these two giants, the pharmaceutical giants, it's a little bit questionable whether a lot of companies are looking really to move here. And I tried to dig deeper, and I found this survey from PwC. And this was done very recently, and it asked US companies in China how the trade war has impacted their operation, right? And I'll draw your attention to the color of the bars here. The green bar is companies saying, no impact. Blue are companies saying, yes, there's some impact, but we will stay and adapt. Now the orange and the red bars are what's of interest for us in terms of relocation, because orange means I'm looking somewhere else to diversify my supply base, or red is I'm moving. Yeah. So you see healthcare, which is the second from the bottom here, it actually has the longest green and blue bar. So a lot of the pharmaceutical companies, US pharma companies in China, are saying I'm going to stay and adapt, or even there's no impact actually. I'm not saying nobody will move, because there are still some red bar, but they are pretty short compared to the other sectors, right? And even for the orange bar diversifying, also quite short. This probably indicates that China has built such a good network of API manufacturing that it's difficult for these companies to even try to find alternative supply base. On the other hand, if we look at the IT industry, right, so second from the top, they don't have any green bar, and 40% are saying we will stay in the debt. So the rest 60% are looking elsewhere. Right? So if we do want to do some investment promotion, maybe we have better bang for the buck if we focus on that sector. Right? Indonesia itself is not really a favorite destination for foreign investors. I think a lot of us are probably aware of the story the World Bank presenting to President Jokowi that Indonesia has been bypassed in multiple ways of relocation. In 2017, 2019, hundreds of companies want to move out for various reasons, rising wages in China, US-China trade war. Only a few come to Indonesia. And BKPM data did record that FDI has been stagnant since the second quarter of 2019, and of course negative in the first quarter now. And BKPM has revised their targets twice so far. If we see on the chart to the right here, FDI play a very minor role in Indonesian economy. The average FDI net inflows as a percent of GDP across ASEAN countries, Indonesia is the second lowest. Right? I mean, far below Singapore, of course, and Vietnam, and even the new members of ASEAN. Well, Indonesia, according to the multilaterals, is not an easy place to do business. This is the ease of doing business rank, monitored by the World Bank. And you see the chart on the left, we have improved a lot. There's no denying. From 120 plus to 73, very good improvement. However, that 73 has been stagnant for a while, since 2017. And during that time that we are not improving, we see our neighboring countries are all rising up. Right? So there's a little bit of a worry there that this a bit of a stagnation will cost us. And if we see in more detail on the components of the AODB ranking, and this is the latest doing business 2020, I think like out of 190 countries, our worst ranking is in the starting of business. So it's difficult to start to begin with. And then the second worst is the enforcing contracts. We are ranked 139 out of 190. So it's very risky to do business here. And it's also difficult to trade across borders if you set up in Indonesia. So you're pretty isolated and you're locked to a domestic market. And things are even harder for foreign investors. This is the FDI Restrictiveness Index done by OECD, and they monitor 69 countries. And as you can see, based on the components on the right here, we are the second most restrictive country in terms of welcoming equity and welcoming key foreign personnel. So in terms of the pharmaceutical industry itself, right, the restructuring of the global value chain in the pharma industry has begun in 2017. In 2017, China has crackdowns, right? Like the Chinese authority closed down a lot of API factories in China out of pollution concerns. And there was much talk about moving out of China back then. And people already stopped thinking about restructuring, so even before the pandemic in the pharma industry. But if you see on the chart to the right here, the foreign direct investment in the pharma industry here is on the decline between 2017 to 2019. So, it doesn't look like they're coming here. And in fact, even domestic investment in pharma industry is on the decline lately. So the problem is, I believe, because Indonesia ran a really heavy ship. And World Bank, in that same presentation to the president, cited the overlaps between ministerial regulations and contradictions between central and regional regulation. And there's a lot of them to handle. And because of that, our president now has this famous term. He coined this term. I really like actually this term, regulatory obesity. And if you see the picture to the right, the chart there, that's the picture of our obesity. Right? I mean, we have 40,000 plus regulations, and about 30,000 of those are split almost equally between ministerial and regional regulation. I mean, and the agencies also have quite a lot of regulation, almost 4,000. And pharmaceutical sector also no different. When our president wants to develop the pharmaceutical industry back in 2016, he issued an instruction to 12 different ministries and agencies to do something about the sector. There is an overarching theme of import substitution, right, of producing things locally. But again, 12 different agencies handling and doing something about the sector. And we're going to see how this may have affected the foreign investment in the sector in the next slide. So this slide shows the foreign direct investment in pharmaceutical industry being realization. And I'll start with the first rules on localization that comes from the Ministry of Health. Back in 2008, Ministry of Health issued a ruling that drugs registered in Indonesia must be produced in Indonesia. Right? So it's trying to force localization, basically. And as you can see, the foreign investment numbers did not really pick up after that regulation. Right? It did pick up in 2013, 2014, but that seems to be mostly because of the JKN coming online. So JKN is the universal health coverage. Now suddenly hundreds of millions of Indonesians have access to subsidized medicine guaranteed by the government. And so that opens up a big market all of a sudden. And you can see investment follows after that, right? You know, when there's market opportunity, business just follow. Then again, in 2016, the patent law comes out. And this patent law have the component of localization as well, because it says that for patent holders, they need to produce their patented product in Indonesia, otherwise they can lose their patent. Right? So again, that's trying to force localization, and with a little bit of lag, it seems to have a negative effect on foreign investment in the industry. And lately, there's been other policies that's coming out from other ministries, and again, it tried to put localization as the big overarching theme. For example, this local content regulation that's issued by the Minister of Industry, specifically for pharmaceutical products. This is a self-declaration, which means the company calculate themselves and declare the local content. However, it needs to be assessed by approved auditors. There are no sanctions in the regulation. However, there are a lot of concern in the industry that this may be used for the e-catalog. Remember, I said JKN, that's the biggest customer for medicine, and they use e-catalog, right? It's a public procurement system. And if this standard now suddenly is put into the e-catalog, then that will close access to a lot of companies. The other thing that's of concern is now there's an extra step of auditing now, right, to check the local content. And as with any regulation, any extra step is prone to rent-seeking activities. The other rules or regulation that's coming online is Omnibus Bill. I think a lot of us are familiar with Omnibus Bill on Job Creation, or RUU Cipta Kerja. And in this RUU, I think that one of the things that's mostly watched by the foreign investors is the revision of patent law. And the RUU Cipta Kerja will remove the local production requirement. And that's a lot of investors are very keen to look at and looking at that, monitoring that. So the other Omnibus Bill, actually probably lesser known, there was an RUU Pharmacy, Omnibus Bill on Pharmacy being planned. It was put in as a Prolegnas Prioritas 2020. However, it's been taken out. Sorry, I have the typo there. It's taken up now from the discussion because of the situation. I think the most exciting development, for me at least, is the proposed 300% super tax deduction for innovation. So this is focusing on R&D activities. If you see the component of the deduction, you can claim the tax deduction for research activities and commercializing it. And I think this is a really good initiative, and it shows Indonesian government's seriousness after a long time always being said to have really low focus on innovation and R&D. At least now this gives signal, yes, the government is ready to cough up some budget for this, because it's not just 100%, it's 300%, right? However, this is costly, considering that our budget is stretched because of COVID-19. You know, paying 300% out of pocket is pretty costly. And also need to consider the overlap with the other regulation, especially the patent law, right? R&D is very innovation, very IT-centric, intellectual property-centric. And if the patent law really forces, R&D companies to produce, then that might diminish the effectiveness of this incentive. And they may not want to do that. They may not have the capacity to commercialize. And also, it seems to favor research-intensive but integrated pharmaceutical. So, the generics producers probably won't get anything out of this incentive, and we probably need a lot of that's a very important part of investment. Okay. And just like Krishna, there's a little bit of bonus preview on IACEPA, and especially on investment provisions for me. And first, from what I can see, the investment provisions in IACEPA largely just maintain the status quo that we have now. I mean, Australia has always been open to foreign investment, and IACEPA doesn't change that; they just remain open, right? If they're open, there's not much to change. Basically. And Indonesia is pretty restrictive to FDI, and it remains so, unfortunately, in the IACEPA. And why I say this is because I see there's still limitation to Australian ownership to 30 to 67% in hundreds of sectors in Indonesia, right? Well, for Australia, again, they don't limit Indonesian ownership for any companies there. I tried to pick up from the 12 priority sectors that said to be the priority interests for Australian investors in Indonesia, and try to compare that with the negative investment list, or DNI, that is still enforced at the moment. And I try to color code this, so hopefully it's clear. The green color, basically IACEPA, is less restrictive than DNI, so it's better. The red color is IACEPA, actually more restrictive than DNI. And the white color is, it's not to mean no restriction, but the restriction is similar or the same with DNI. So as you can see here, the higher education is a very good sector to invest in, because it does have better provisions. 100% foreign ownership, no geographical limitation, and you can open anywhere now. Right? For hospitals, also 100% ownership, no geographical limitation. However, there's this one clause in the IACEPA that says for Class A and B hospitals only. So there's a size limitation, and that actually didn't exist in the DNI. I'm not sure about the other regulation, but at least that doesn't exist in DNI. For energy, there's a lot of subsectors where the ownership cap in IACEPA is lower actually than DNI. Right? So if you go by DNI, you can own more, but IACEPA is lower. For the mining, aged care, transportation, wastewater management, these sectors was not listed in DNI, which implies that it's open for foreign ownership 100%. However, in IACEPA, it's listed and it does have ownership cap. Right? And for the others, as I say, it's the similar restriction of ownership compared to DNI. So if we compare the two economies, like which places are more likely to receive investment because of this IACEPA, well, we can see that Australia, I'm comparing the EODB, ease of doing business of Australia and Indonesia based on the 2020 doing business. And the orange bar is Australia, the blue bar is Indonesia. And you can see a lot of the orange bars are shorter or much shorter than the blue bar, right? In only two places, getting electricity and protecting minority investors, Australia has a longer bar, so it's more difficult there. So it seems easier to do business in Australia, right? And if we see on the picture to the right, the chart to the right, this is the current account deficit. Australia has been running current account deficits since the 1990s, only recently come back to surplus. And this is largely because Australia is very open to foreign capital. So Australia basically is a net importer of foreign capital, foreign investment, right? So if we do want to welcome a lot of FDI, we might have to sort of be satisfied with the current account deficit. And current account deficit is okay as long as it is about importing capital or investment. So the bottom line is it's easier for Indonesian investors to set up in Australia than the other way around. Lastly, just some short conclusion. COVID-19 exposes the problem that was there all along. There's a gap between policy and reality, and the trade war has created slowdown. We were a little bit slow in responding to that. When COVID-19 happens, we just got unprepared. There's a lot of tension also between controlling and enabling. Indonesian government like to regulate and control things, but that sometimes impinge on ease of doing business. And if we have a coherent regulatory framework, it's probably easier to navigate this crisis. Incentives are good but costly, and there's probably an indication of a problem in the structural side. So if we do structural reform, probably don't need so much incentive. FTAs are also a good tool, but again, no replacement for good domestic policies. And in a crisis, there's always this temptation to focus inward. And I see this as two approaches in making policies during crisis. First is to look inward, focus on just inward, and build walls to protect ourselves. And I call this loading the ship, where we load our internal ship more and more with regulation. Well, the second is looking outward, trying to identify places where other economies have probably retreated, other suppliers retreated, and try to enter that. And I call this raising the water. So my final word is that I think it's better for us to try to raise the water instead of overloading the ship. That concludes my presentation, and I look forward to comments and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andree. Such a very interesting, thoughtful, and stimulating presentation. So before we are going to Q&A, I would like to have some short comments on both presentation. Please, everyone, if you have some question to Andree and Krisna, you can write on the chat box, or you can start to raise your hand in the participant box. Krisna focused his presentation on recent trade policies in Indonesia, especially relating to how to make sure COVID-19 related goods are available with affordable price. And Andree discussed some challenges in Indonesia policies to attract FDI, especially in pharmaceutical sectors, and talks about the investment allocation opportunity in Indonesia. So both presenters talk about issues relating to trade and investment policies in Indonesia, and mention that some domestic issue related to regulation and institution that impeding enriching better performance of trade in investment. And like Andree said, COVID-19 exposed the real problems in Indonesia, and the need to carry out the effective reforms become more urgent. In this regard, I would like to quote something that I often heard from Pak Halhil on sadly laws, that bad times might produce good economic policy, and good times frequently the reverse. So it is actually an opportunity for Indonesia to make big policy reform. So let us be more optimistic here. Back to Krisna's presentation, I would like to comment on the graph that shows some points of time that reflects even when the government announced various policies. That is very interesting one. So in very short time, as Krisna said, that government has turned things on and off and creating some non-tariff measures. And like Krisna said, that the trade policy in that situation might not the best option. And other countries, like Krisna said, other countries need our products as we need other countries' products. So actually, Krisna already mentioned too that it does not happen uniquely only in Indonesia, but many countries do the same thing. As yesterday I checked WTO website, around 70 countries had submitted a total of almost 200 active non-tariff measure notification related to COVID-19 to WTO. So the highest one is from Brazil that has submitted 23 notification, and Indonesia has 7. So countries like Thailand, Vietnam, Myanmar even did some temporary export ban to food products. So interestingly, developed countries like EU, US and Australia also do such measures. So for example, Australia has announced export prohibition to some products that categorize as personal protective equipment and sanitizer essential, such as face masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, and so on. So I agree completely with Krisna said that we need more trade, not restriction. We embrace global value chain, not self-sufficiency. But in this situation, when the shock is something that never happened before, supply and demand are severely damaged, many countries become panicked due to the shock and tend to be reactive. by producing so many non-tariff measures. I think temporarily WTO allows countries to do that, but with notification. So countries need to notify WTO. But we really hope that this is just temporarily. The good side is some countries actually have already removed the restriction policy, such as Vietnam already removed the export ban of rice. And we really hope that, and Krisna also mentioned that we already relaxed some others too. We really hope that the inward-looking perspective and the protectionism will not be long-lasting. The second one that interesting from Krisna presentation is the point on how policy could be the best manufacturing policy. I couldn't agree more on this point. So government initiative to allow manufacturing firms to do production by providing permits to conduct activities with certain protocols and health standards, or we call it IOMQ, is a way to have a balance between economic and health objectives. So the manufacturing firms need to follow some technical guidance from WHO and also Ministry of Health, such as washing hands, using masker, physical distancing between employees, and so on. The challenge is how to supervise and monitor the implementation, and maybe some industry cannot do that, and how to make sure that as much as many firms can follow the protocols. Many business surveys that have been conducted by various agencies mention that businesses in Indonesia face massive supply and demand shocks during this pandemic and reduce their capacity to run their business. But after the relaxation of the PSBB several weeks ago, actually the business sentiment seems to be improved. PMI score is a bit better, but still lower than 50. But on the other hand, it is quite a challenge to health indicators that tend to be worse. So how to make sure that business follow the protocol is very, very challenging actually. Commenting on Andree's presentation, he started to discuss that COVID-19 increased the challenge in global investment on top of trade war tension between US and China. But it also creates opportunity for countries, especially in Southeast Asia, due to investment reallocation opportunities from China. It is very informative to see some graphs that show how Indonesia is placed compared to other countries in various indicators. Indonesia seems to have some domestic issue, not favorable for investors, and we need to tackle many things to attract more investors. Yes, Indonesia is less integrated in global value chain than its regional peers, and we want more to have integrated, to be more integrated, and it is also the direction from National Medium Term Development Plan by enhancing the attractiveness of Indonesia as a manufacturing location for foreign investor. This requires actions in multiple areas, including reducing restriction in FDI, like Andree mentioned. The COVID-19 shocks could make some transformation on global value chains, and we still do not know how the global value chain will transform. But something that remains is firms and investors will always try to maximize the profits and minimize the costs with all the new constraints and all new arrangements. So yes, we need to do some reforms, as Andree suggested. The institutional framework for investment promotion and facilitation need to be improved. Coordination remains an important objective since we have so many stakeholders that involve. Investment facilitation reforms become the government focus on RPJMN. Government want to have a fully integrated online single submission and reduce the procedures and requirements for investors. Something that quite new actually during the COVID-19 is government now become more focused on aftercare strategy for existing investors in order to retain investors and encourage expansion from the existing investors. There are so many challenges at regional level that need to be tackled too. So we would like to strengthen place-based investment promotion, such as how to connect relocation opportunity with the potential and ready industrial zones. So investment and industry become the focus of government annual work plan for 2021. Government expected by next year, hopefully Indonesia will be in the phase of economic recovery. So investment will help to improve the economy by providing financing for business and jobs for people. But as Andree already mentioned, so many challenges that need to be tackled first. I think I will stop there. I will open some questions. Let's start with 3 questions. We already have some. So we have questions from Yesi. But Yesi, do you want to talk by yourself, or do I need to read your question?
You can just read my question, please.
Okay, Mbak Yesi said that thanks for the presentation. He asked question for Krisna. So he asked that some clarification on the Ministry of Trade regulation might be needed, but I am not going to do that now. I'm interested to know that, do you have any quantitative analysis on the impact of COVID-19 on Indonesia trade, and what will be the forecast of 2020? And do you also have some empirical evidence of the effectiveness of MOT regulation as responses to COVID-19? And what would have you done if you were the Minister of Trade in Indonesia back in March 2020? And other question is from Riandi. During this COVID-19, will the trade reform be more feasible to be done at multilateral level, or should we still hope for unilateral act? Need to take account also that the WTO is being increasingly dismissed now, led by the US. And other question is from, okay, I will let Pak Peter Mekwali that already raised hand to ask the question directly. Please, Pak Peter.
Oh, baiklah, terima kasih. You can hear me, yeah? Is jelas,
Yes,
yeah? Oh, okay. I have a question, 2 questions, one to Pak Krisna and one to Pak Andree. I think they are simple enough, but I just like to have a response. To Krisna, you said, bilangnya, you said that the cost of not healing COVID is immense. Now, actually, I agree, saya setuju, I agree, but of course there are people who do not agree. There are people who say that economy dulu, yeah, that we have to mendorong economy. And so really they are saying secara implicitly, they do not agree that the cost, or they say that the cost of not healing is immense, but they say it is too expensive to wait. Jadi pertanyaan saya, my question is, what do we say to them? The trouble is, this seems agak kabur, yeah? There are pluses and minuses, and akhirnya, at the end of the day, it seems to be no more than a matter of opinion. Someone can say yes, someone can say no. So pertanyaan saya, my question to you is, what do we say to these people who would say to you, I don't agree? What do you say to them? Now, my second question is to Pak Andree. Terima kasih, Pak. You talked quite a lot about the current account deficit in in Indonesia. Now, ini lagu lama, this is an old issue. So I have a question to you, and I just want to make the observation, I think you know, that Australia has pengalaman and experience in this, and that is that we in Australia have had a current account deficit, rata-rata, secara rata-rata, of about 3% GDP, 3% of GDP, selama 200 tahun, for 200 years. We have had a long-term current account deficit. And as both of you have mentioned, Australia is a capital importer. So my question to you really is, I mean, I think this is, Australia seems to have done quite well. Dengan contoh ini, with the experience dengan pengalaman dari Australia, from the experience of Australia, my question to you, Pak Andree, is why do you think, what is your comment? Why do you think there is this long-term concern? It's a lagu lama in Indonesia, a long-term concern with the current account deficit. Kenapa? Saya sebagai orang Australia, as an Australian, I am puzzled. Kenapa? Why is there this concern? So that's my question to you. So there is a question to each of Pak Krisna and Pak Andree. Terima kasih ya.
Krisna first or me first?
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Krishna, I think you can answer first and then Andree.
All right, I'll try to answer it as fast as I can. Thank you to Deasy. That's an excellent question. But really, if there's something that needs to be corrected, please do so. But let's just focus on the question, right? Do I know how big is MOTs affecting the trade? Can't say that I have the hard evidence to answer that, right? Trade data has a timely problem, but here you can see that on February, here export on February, the thing that I told, Indonesia did export a lot of PPE suddenly, so suddenly this is unprecedented, never happened before. But March 2020, it goes down. So I would guess, I will be careful here, but I would guess this is because of the trade ban, right? So, but sadly, I don't really have a better data. Usually we use like timely data from which country we do that. But I still need to wait. But in short, I don't know the answer to your question, like how big the impact is. And then, yeah, for projection, WTO already project that, so I don't have to. If I'm lazy, I just check WTO's report, and they say global trade will shrink between 13 to 35% in 2020. Anyway, globalization is already on the decrease in a sense since global financial crisis anyway. So COVID probably make that even faster. We'll see. But of course, like I said, we need to connect together again. Probably this can be also a turning point. If I am the Minister of Trade, oh my God, that's a very hard question. I'd probably do what you guys do as well. I will probably ban my trade too, out of panic. The difference is, just like Deasy said, lots of countries talk to each other. Indeed, Indonesia have this G20 meeting, I believe, in March 26 or something, and basically the whole country started to talk with each other, and like Deasy said, some of them remove the trade ban. Indonesian government took some time to remove it, so I can't really say what they have in mind during this COVID. It's hard time. Everyone don't know what to do. I mean, I don't know what to do, right? This is new for me as well. So probably, to answer your question, I will probably do the same thing. I will probably ban that as well, but after the G20, after I'm talking to Ministry of Industry, or after I'm talking to Minister of Finance, I mean, I already know, because I'm from Ministry of Industry, I already know that Indonesia import a lot of inputs for textiles. So when I saw that trade ban, I was like, okay, do we import these input for this textile? Riyandi, question. I hope that answered your question, but feel free to send me an email if you think we need to discuss more. Really love to do that. Riyandi, multi or uni. This is what I basically said about the IACEPA, right? This time, leadership, global, international leadership isn't the same as the GFC before. So probably we need to take action, right? We need to be the leader, even though we are small. If we unite, oh my God, I'm so sweet, and I. But if we just combine our powers, we can be, I mean, we can probably as good as the US or China. We'll see about that, however. Pia, what do we say to them? I mean, I think lots of people already say what I want to say to them. But sadly, in Crawford, I never really trained on how to, you know, express the analysis that I make. More of how to make analysis, but not so much how best to say it. It's probably come to communication or political scientists. I'm not sure. But really, to answer your question, lots of people already say what I want to say. It's probably about how to say it or who to say it. More like. I hope that answered your question. I'm really sorry, but if it's not. Thanks, Deasy.
Yeah, thanks, Krisna. Andree, you want to say something?
Yeah, I guess I respond to Peter's question. Thank you very much, Peter. That's a very interesting and very relevant question, I suppose. And if I may, like if you ask me why Indonesia is so scared of current account deficit, and I think a lot of a lot of people here doesn't realize that the current account deficit is not just net import of goods and services, but also in terms of capital. The rhetorics around current account deficit has always been put as an import against export. And it's always bad to when we import a lot and export not so much, right? And you can see the gap here, even in sort of like a lot of the government talk, say we want to reduce import, but we want to increase investment. And when you have increased investment, it will become a current account deficit. And I do believe also there's another part of this is, if I may share the screen a little bit about my slide. If you notice, right, Indonesia was running a current account deficit up to the financial crisis, the Asian financial crisis of '97, right? So I think a lot of people are thinking that this is part of the reason of the crisis, right? And after that, we're running a surplus and we're doing okay since '98. Oh, now we're running into deficit again. This is a repeat of the history, right? And I think that propagates that feeling that, well, we need to be self-sufficient and not do with imports, right? So at least that's my opinion, and I would welcome if any other people have different opinions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andree. We have many questions. I will Head from DFAT, Michael from DFAT would like to ask your question directly, please. So Head asks, can the presenters comment what if any impact there is, from transportation infrastructure improvement, Trans-Jawa, Jakarta-Bandung Railway, on smoothing Indonesia global value chain links with the Southeast Asia and other regions. And also related to that, there is other question related to the infrastructure. How is the Indonesia elite and society perceive China and China role and in the middle of the pandemic? Is there and are there many delays in completing high-profile infrastructure, and what is the impact? I think that's the question for Andree, and I will let Pak Terry Hull and Ben from Lowy Institute to ask the question directly, please.
Hi, this is Ben from the Lowy Institute. My question is for Andree, but also for Krisna if he wants to answer. So is the problem we're talking about here really bad regulation? Is it a technical issue of the drafting of law? Or is it more one of Indonesia's protectionist economic philosophy and the fact that that economic philosophy is actually incredibly popular with politicians, the bureaucracy, and the Indonesian public?
Okay, and Pak Terry Hull?
Thank you. I really enjoyed both papers and fascinating data you presented. I take from both of you that you are counting on increased mobility of goods and services through increased trade to help provide PPE and medical equipment, and also to increase the investment in Indonesia, to welcome investment to help the economy improve. But given that in this time of COVID-19, one of the most dramatic immobilities is the immobility of people, the immobility of labor. And I don't know the degree to which labor immobility and people immobility will inhibit trade and investment policies. Do you see the mobility of labor as being an issue that has to be addressed here? Thank you.
Okay, since we're running out the time, so maybe I can let other question from Elvirianti Novita BPS from Kota Sorong. Do you want to ask the question directly? And also, yes, and also question from Tom. I think Krisna already comment that. Tom, you would like to ask your question directly, please?
Yes. There was a quick text reply, but I was just curious about, there was a Jakarta Post report that China had ordered some face masks from Indonesia. I'm just wondering if there's any overarching policy in place which would say domestic demand takes priority, and in cases like this, the orders might be held locally for local use rather than being exported.
Yeah, thank you. And Bu Evrianti Novita?
Thank you. My question is very simple. So it's about relocation in Indonesia from other countries like USA. So I see it's like they focus on manufacturing sector. Is it possible for us to get advantages, overweight the disadvantages? And then how far this will benefit for Indonesia in general? Thank you.
Thank you. Please, Andree will can answer first, then after that, Krisna.
Okay, there's a lot of questions, so I'll try to be brief. For Heath, in terms of the infrastructure project, I think there has been talks about delays in some infrastructure project because of the budget concern, and I think the projects you're asking that you list out there is mostly interconnectivity within the country, right? So it will help within the country, right? But I think what should be the focus also is the port projects, which you don't see a lot, because that improves interconnectivity outside to the global value chains. And I think the big question mark at the moment is a lot of these projects are given or sort of like assigned to SOEs, and their debt burden is really worrying, right? So that might be another factor that becomes a question mark. And in terms of Ben's question, I'll try to move forward fast to Ben's question. Well, I guess the ideological part of this feeds into the regulation, the bad regulation, if I may say, right? It is definitely not helping, but that we have this nationalistic ideology in making policies. But again, the issue also is on the quality of regulation itself. A lot of regulation seems to be a bit rushed without a lot of consultation with the general public, and once it comes out, it just creates a lot of controversy, and so that delays the lawmaking process as well. So we need to figure out both sides also, like how to address the ideological issues, but also in the lawmaking process itself, and avoiding the overlap. And for Pak Terry and Ibu Elvirianti, I hope I pronounced it correctly. Actually, I think that my answer for both of you is quite similar. yes, immobility of persons will be a problem, and labor will be an issue. Labor-intensive industry will be an issue, and because of that, health policy becomes important, right? The only way you can allow mobility, or at least for me, is when you can make sure that your health policy can contain the virus, right? So if we cannot contain the virus, if people cannot come, then investment will be delayed, because investment are made by people. And if people cannot work in factories, in manufacturing or whatever, manufacturing is usually thought of as a labor intensive, but then you have to remember, they can also use machines. So if we do not have a strong health policy for this, then the industry that will come will be capital intensive. They will use machines to replace people. And that has happened. The industry that's running well during the SBB are actually mostly capital intensive, using machines. So again, so I echo Krisna's position that health policy is probably the best industrial and investment policy at the moment. And we need to really pay attention to that. So that will be my answer, and I hope that answers everything.
Yes, please, Krisna.
Okay, so I'll comment a little bit on the infrastructure project. Definitely it helps, especially since Indonesian manufacturing are concentrated heavily on Jawa Barat, apa bahasa Indonesia? West Java, yeah. So you really need to send it to the other parts of Indonesia. I think I also saw an instance where Indonesian government suddenly see a rise of imported steel. Of course, huge infrastructure project required unprecedented amount of inputs, right? Most of them come from, guess where? China. And then suddenly, oh, we import a lot of steel, let's cut them a little bit. And then things get screwed a little bit. Of course, now COVID-19 stopped it's a while, but yeah, I echoed Andree. Basically, it was indeed important to send things in a timely manner, make it things a bit faster. A role of China, I can't say that I can say anything about that. It's probably more of politics than economics. So I'll just save myself and get out of from this question. I'm really sorry about that. Okay, so much question. Probably I will also comment a little bit on Ben's question about the regulation. I think the drafting probably have something funny about it. Andree already shows us that on the investment side, at least, it doesn't really give a lot of advantage to Australia compared to other countries, right? And in Indonesia, I also mentioned that trade regulated by a lot of different agencies apart for the NTM. So I'm not sure how Indonesian government will kind of coordinate this together. Gives Australia a special privilege. Ministry of Trade already regulates a rule of origin. It's just published a few days before this, but other ministries I don't really aware if they make something based on IACEPA. So yeah, a bit of combination of both really. What else? Can you remind me, Deasy? I'm sorry, I think. Oh, probably I will answer Tom, was it? Yeah. So about the export, right? So the ban don't really make export of PPE zero, because there's an exception to that. So such as a special economic zones doesn't apply to them. And also some instances, I share link to you, by the way, you can try to open it, and which basically says some firms that still have to export amid commitment to buyers are still allowed to do that. So in 1 April, Ministry of Trade relaxed the export ban on a case-by-case basis, probably because of that, to fulfill the commitment of to the buyers. So yeah, no, it's not become zero at all. So probably still export these orders.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, sorry, I don't really have the hard data to be very sure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Krisna and Andree, for the answers. We have some people raising hand. Mbak Yesi, do you still have some question to ask?
Right. Thank you, Daisy. I just need to explain a bit because at the time that MOT released the regulation to ban the export, the ban itself is already happened. I mean, in the field that the the customs already banned someone want to export the PPE. So the regulation itself came out to respond that because the uncertainty about on that is more costly, right? We ban, but if certain is much better than the uncertainty in the field. So and later, Ministry of Trade also released the exception. You're right, Krisna, at the Minister Regulation number 34, because like to facilitate any past contract. So only for the past contract happened before the ban itself. So the ban is on 18th of March, and then it's temporary. So it doesn't against it's not against any international regulations because it's only temporary up to 30th of June. So Indonesia also actively joined in many joint declaration, as you said, in G20, also in ASEAN. Also, we Indonesia actively joined and joint declaration in G20, and also lastly on the contract whether I don't know whether you know it's a Islamic countries organization, like that. Also lately on that, and then in the Ministry of Trade issued remove the ban before the time up, right? It's released on 16th of June. It's also to facilitate the export of that, and up to now, the latest regulation, the number 57/2020. Up to now, there are 10 exports already. We released 10 exports permit for the PPE since it came out. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Yesi, and I will ask Pak Head. Do you still have some question to ask, please?
Bu Desi, thank you. No, I'm fine. Thank you for your answers to my questions earlier. Terima kasih.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Head. And Riyandi, do you still have question to ask? And Pak Rafdi Setiawan, do you have quick question to ask, please?
Yes, I have. So I've already typed my questions on chats, or should I read it to you?
Yeah, you can briefly mention the question.
Just based on my questions, right? About the topic that you're raising now. My question is that does Indonesia's current deficit have any significant effect to its capital outflow? And does it also cause, for recently 2 weeks lately, the weakening of exchange rate of USD to Indonesian rupiah? That's it.
Yeah, I think all question for Krisna. Please, Krisna.
All right, thank you, Desi. Desi, thank you very much hugely for your confirmation. It's kind of also answered Tom's question, right? So commitment still available. And yeah, indeed, it's interesting to know that it's already happened in the field by the customs even before the ban. Interesting. Thanks a lot. I didn't have that information before. So the question, give me a moment, let me see. The capital outflow, yes, indeed, on the early days of COVID-19, there's a huge numbers of capital outflowing from Indonesia. So yeah, that definitely affect, but I'm really sure that on investment, Andree can help me with that. Yeah, I mean, that's probably everything, right, Madisi?
Yeah, I think, yes, maybe I would like to let Andree to have closing remarks to answer some question that maybe has an answer yet from Pak Rifandi.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I lost the question somewhere, but I think, like, when we talk about current account deficits, macroeconomic is a very complex thing. There's a lot of things moving around at the same time, and it's very difficult to say this causes that, and that was my answer. So, what the deficit causes, the exchange rate, is very hard to say, like, exactly. Right? And I think current account deficit itself, if I remember correctly, the term is a structural equation or whatever. So it's an equation of two things, right? It's like export import, but also savings investment. So all these things are moving at the same time, and I wouldn't be able to answer if that really causes the change in the exchange rate. And maybe Pak Acho probably a bit more experience in that.
Yeah, that's really an identity, right? If you have a deficit in a current account, that means capital is outflowing. So yeah, it's a macroeconomic 101.
So I think we are already running out of time. So thank you, Andree and Krisna, for the presentation and discussion. Thanks so much for all participants. It is such a very productive and stimulating discussion. We have more than 90, I guess, participants today. So thank you all. Now let me hand over back to Pak Acho. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Deasy, Krisna, and Andree, and also all the participants. Thanks for attending, and I will just let Nuka to close and maybe announce some future events. So over to you, Nuka.
Hi everyone, thank you. I just want to announce next week we will have Eva Nisa from ANU and Nafa Nurania from ANU/IPAC to talk about how religious communities deal with the pandemic. This should be a very, very good panel, like today. And then the week after that, we will have Pak Chris Manning, Joanna Octavia from University of Warwick, and Dr. Titi Anas from Ministry of Finance to talk about the labor during the COVID pandemic. So thank you. So please join us next week. Thank you. And I'm going to close this.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day.